Hey everybody, welcome back to my series on creating comics, and this is video 3, which is actually part 2 of writing comics. If you haven't seen the videos up to this point, feel free to go ahead and check them out. I've got a playlist for them all, and come back and see this one. So this is writing comic books part 2. We're going to cover character creation and pacing. In the first video for writing comics, we covered kind of techniques, steps, and approaches, how to write if you're drawing yourself, how to write for an artist, things like that. Today we're going to get a little bit more into the creative angle of things, which is always fun, and I can seriously talk about forever, but I'm going to do my best to condense my thoughts into as short a presentation as I can. So creating characters is actually one of my, or probably is my favorite part of doing this job. So you have your story in your head, and of course your story needs characters to move forward, whether it be humans, cartoons, anthropomorphic appliances, whatever it is you have. You've got characters in your mind. You want these characters to feel real. You want your audience to get invested and care about these characters, and the best way to do that is to make these characters as developed as you can. And my approach to doing this is I put more information in my head for each character than we'll probably ever see the printed page. Because especially if you're doing an ongoing series, or this is maybe just a book or a graphic novel that you plan to return to someday, it's good to have this wealth of knowledge. It's going to help you be able to grow this character, and you'll find as you're writing the characters and as these characters are going on the journeys of your stories that you're actually just recording what you know about the character rather than just coming up with, what the character should do off the top of your head and avoiding that self-insertion risk of just making characters your own voice. There are some writers where the characters always just speak in the same voice, and it's really hard to get invested into a story because the writer, everybody maybe is snarky, or maybe everybody is grim or narcissistic, and there's not really any difference to the characters, and it's really hard as a reader to get invested in a story world if everybody's the same. When you're watching The Addams Family, Wednesday Addams is a dire, grim nihilist, but the rest of the family tends to be pretty upbeat, which makes her stand out as a character, which is why people like her so much. So let's talk about my process for creating characters. So when I start by creating character, the first thing that I do, once I kind of conceptualize what that character is, I sit down and I actually have, I kid you not, a worksheet that has many, many questions on it. And like I said, most of these will probably never make the printed page, but it's important as the writer that I know these things about the character, because these are the things that are going to, one, determine how that character reacts to various situations, but also as I'm progressing the story, as I'm moving forward, I may want to bring elements of this character's past into the present, into the current storyline, and having it all established makes it a lot easier for me to do that. I can go back to my notes and I can look to see what this character's background was, what they've been through, what their preferences and tastes are, and incorporate this into future stories that I may not have planned out in my head yet. So as we look at this character sheet, this isn't the exact one I used. This is one that I downloaded. Because the one I use is handwritten. It's hard to read, so I downloaded one. This has a lot of the same questions. And it's a really good thought exercise to thinking about your character and their mannerisms, their likes and dislikes. And this starts pretty easy. You have things like name, age, race, height, weight, appearance, all that stuff. And if you want to fill that in, that's great. If you want to just do a character sketch and leave that as your official kind of reference image for the character, that works too. But then you go down things, it gets a little more in depth. What's your favorite character's favorite color? What's their least favorite color? Why? Is there a reason why that's their least favorite color? What would be their favorite music? What would be their favorite food? These are interesting things. And then as you try to think of your character, well, my character is a student, or this character is an old archaeologist, whatever they might be, and you have to put yourself in the mindset of that character. What would your character's favorite show be? Not your favorite television show, your character's. And it helps you understand that character, and it's going to help you breathe a uniqueness into that character that's going to make them seem like a living, breathing person that your audience is ultimately going to have an easier time getting invested in. So I really can't emphasize enough the power of doing this kind of research. And then you get into things like the character's family. Where do they come from? Were they born to a rich family, a poor family? Do they have siblings? Do they know both of their parents? Were they orphans? Were they raised by a single parent? These are all things that may not come into play right now as you're writing your story, but as you continue writing your character, you continue writing your book, and maybe you're writing the second series in a series of books, or maybe you're just in an ongoing comic that's maybe found success and it's lasting longer than you expected it to, you can go back to these sheets, and maybe one of that character's siblings comes back and is in trouble, or maybe they had a falling out, and that the consequences of that fight are now coming back to haunt them, or maybe their brother or sister or father or mother died and they weren't on good terms with them. These are the types of story seeds for your characters going forward, and it's going to help you as a writer be able to come up with these scenarios, these storylines that are going to be impactful, and they're going to be relatable for other readers, because these are things that we all share. We all come from somewhere. We all have a family. We all have preferences and favorites. So it's going to be really helpful to you to have these things established for your character. And for example, this character here, I chose this character for a reason, and this is going to get us into the next point or part of it as we transition into the pacing. It's important that as you're planning your character throughout your story, that your character has growth. You don't want your character to start out your story the same way they finish it. They need to grow, they need to change, they need to learn along the way. And that's one of the reasons that people have trouble with, say the quote unquote Mary Sue kind of character, where really the character in the first scene of the movie or the first page of the book has all of the skills, the relevant powers, whatever it is, to overcome the antagonist or overcome the threat of the book, and they don't really have a chance to grow. So there's no real stakes there. And throughout life, we come across challenges, and we have to learn and adapt and grow to overcome them. That's why characters that have problems and flaws are so relatable, because we all have problems and flaws. We all come across things in our lives that we don't know how to deal with, and we need to acquire the knowledge or the skill to be able to overcome that problem. Then if we see it again in the future, we know we rely on that past experience. So this character is one for my book, and just for to put it out there, I use characters for my own books just to avoid copyright problems. But so this is a character for my own book. This is where she pretty much starts the story. She's kind of a computer hacker character and kind of a sideline character who elevated herself a bit more to a main character in the book. And this is her in the latest storyline. So as you can see, she's come a long way since I started writing her as this kind of, I don't want to say meek, but she was definitely more of a observer, more kind of the person in the chair at the computer. Now, her appearance is very different. Her role in the story is very different. It's been really fun to write this character because of the journey that she's been on. And then when you're dealing with kind of the appearance of your character, your design, whether you're going to be the artist of it or you're going to be handing that out to somebody else, just to find something simple, just something to look at as you're writing for this character, because sometimes you're gonna get in these blocks where you don't really know how to answer a question, or you don't really know what the character's doing, and sometimes you just need to look that character in the face. So it's really good to have that visual design nailed down before you start the actual writing process. At least it was for me. So, and again, this is all of this is just my process. Yours might be completely different, but what I find helpful is to have these images along with kind of the questionnaires that I fill out, and I eventually just kind of create this Bible that goes along with the book that has each character's visual reference and these story notes, these personality notes that go along with them, to where maybe if this book is ever successful and, God willing, I may be handing this off to another creative team someday, then they have all this to go by. They have all my original research besides just the volumes of books that I've written beforehand. So this is a really helpful resource as a creator and as a writer, especially one who has ambition that your creation outlasts your tenure on it, that this is something that you maybe will keep going after you finish your part with it. After you've said all you have to say, maybe somebody else will come along. You can hand that off to somebody else. They're going to continue that story and these characters' journeys without you, but you'll have given them the foundation they need to do that. Now let's speak a little bit more about pacing. So story pacing is interesting because everybody has their own kind of way of, writing a story, approaching whether you're doing the usual 3-act, 4-act story, however it is you're going to do it. I just want to cover a couple of basics that I've learned. One of the things that I realized that really helped me with getting started, because for me, that first page, that first scene can oftentimes be the hardest to write. How does this start? Sometimes I'll have the end of a story, but it's that beginning that's rough. And if you can't nail that beginning, you're never going to get, straight across the end. It's not like you can just write it backwards. Maybe some people can. I can't. So I find that really the best story, especially when you're dealing with comic books, the best stories start with like an action sequence, something that hooks the reader right away, lets you know the stakes, and something that's visually interesting and just really exciting to see. So I brought up the first few pages of the first issue of my book here. So just to show, it starts off this establishing shot. We're in a spaceship out in space. You see the remnants of a battle, and then we see the main character's introduced here. He's crashed through a wall. There's debris everywhere, and now we see that character just tearing through more and more people as he's escaping, the ship that he's in, coming to Earth. So that's how I started my comic out. And if you think of the best stories, think of some of the stories the movies that you've loved, growing up. Think Star Wars. Star Wars starts off with a space battle. Princess Leia's ship is being chased down by a Star Destroyer. Indiana Jones starts off with him raiding a tomb that's full of booby traps to get the golden idol and ultimately having to fight his way off of that island. So all of these great stories, all these movies that we love, always start with something to get the audience on the ground running. You want to hit that ground fast, get people invested, understand what your character can do, if that makes any sense. And obviously, not every story can take this. If you're deciding to do like a slice of life, or if you're doing maybe like a historical biopic type story, a biography, then you're going to want to go with something different. But those hooks are still kind of have to be fast paced. Maybe if you're doing a slice of life comic, or slice of life story, maybe it starts off with a character having trouble getting to work that day and they're having to rush to get themselves together because they've overslept and they're going to miss their train. Or a student walking home from school gets bullied. Something like that. Still, it doesn't have to be action. It doesn't have to be combat and violence, but it's still something that is a conflict. There is an event, there is stakes, and there's something that's keeping the character from their goal. And that conflict can be whatever you want it to be. It could be against a physical adversary in the case of a battle. It could be against like vehicles fighting, like Star Wars, a spaceship battle. It could just be a race against time. Think Back to the Future. That movie opens up literally with Marty McFly oversleeping and having to run to school. That's the conflict. The conflict is he's late. And as we learn, once he arrives to school, he's chronically late and it's a problem and he's going to get in trouble for it. So you want to think of that. You want to think of, okay, the character's in a situation, and it's usually a situation that they need to fight or think or have their wits about them to get out of it. And that shows what a bit of the character's personality, how they deal with that type of conflict, but also it shows a little bit of their capabilities. Again, think of that beginning of Back to the Future. We see, he does the skateboard thing. He's grabbing the backs of cars and having them pull him along the street, which is something that sets up for a chase later on down the movie. It's a very effective storytelling device, and it gets you hooked in right away because already you're in with Marty with one of his struggles. So that's a good way to think about how to start a story. And usually once you get that beginning going, the rest of the stories just kind of flow from there. Usually you want to resolve that conflict and then move on to the next act or introduce the next concept, however you want to do it. But that starts the book off at a pretty exciting pace. And then for me, because I write episodic comics, 22 pages each, I approach each book with a similar type of approach. Now, normally I try to end on some kind of a cliffhanger. So usually the next issue is beginning around about where the last one ended, but I usually try to end it with something that's exciting or a big revelation is about to happen. So there's always something that when you look at that first scene in the book is going to be something that hopefully, if I've done my job right, is going to be something that's going to be exciting for that writer to read and something that's going to be interesting for that writer to see visually, or that reader to see rather. So there you go. That's kind of my approach to character development and pacing. This video has already been a bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I hope this helps you guys with your own stories as far as getting them written, getting them down on paper. Next video, we're going to start getting into the art process, the drawing, the putting this comic, the pen to paper, and a lot to that one too. I'll probably do that in one of a few videos as well. And then, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how to get your finished comic printed and ultimately sold. So I hope you guys are enjoying the series. please let me know in the comments below if you like it. I love engaging with this kind of stuff. I'm really passionate about creating comics. So if you guys want to talk about it in the comments below, I would really love to just engage with you guys about it. If you ever want to check out my comics, I'll put a link in the description to this video. If you want to see my website, midnightcomics.net, you can take a look at my comics. There's an online store by there if you'd like to purchase any. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there. So thanks for hanging out with me, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye.